Now coming to the last chapter of the book, students, this is a very small chapter of consumer protection, and it is just of 4 out of 15 marks from this unit 5. And this 4 mark, let me tell you students, it's only the 1 markers. You are getting 4 1 markers out of this chapter. So you can imagine that variety of questions can be asked and in small manner. So you just have to be careful about the smaller topics involved in the chapter. So let us first talk about the importance of consumer protection. But before moving to the importance, let me tell you one thing, that this particular concept of consumer protection is governed under the Consumer Protection Act 2019. Yes students, you heard it right, it's 2019, because this particular year has repealed and replaced the original Consumer Protection Act that came in the year 1986. So now importance of consumer protection, as far as this concept is concerned, it is very important to know that why the business or the consumers need to be protected. So if you see from the consumer's point of view, students, it is due to their ignorance. They are widely ignored, they ignore themselves, and they sometimes feel that they do not have any portal to say their grievances. So that's why and many a times what happens, this is very obvious reason, students, that consumers are widespread. They are located at wide localities and they are completely unorganized. There is no association working as far as their rights and reliefs and the responsibilities are concerned. So that is why they need to be formed into an association, and therefore due to unorganized segment of consumers, this is very important. Similarly, they are exploited, widespread exploitation happens on the consumers, because by the business entities, business are generally in a higher position, and consumer being a single unit or maybe sometimes due to being unorganized, they are widely exploited by unscrupulous and exploitative trade practices which are completely unfair and unsafe, and sometimes they are delivered adulterated goods which are completely not good for their health, false and misleading statements in advertisements, then black marketing and hoarding. These are all negative practices that consumer must be protected from. Now let us see from the business point of view that why exactly we need to follow the concept of consumer protection. Business, you see students, is a social concept. It runs in the society. It takes the resources from the society, and therefore it becomes in the long term interest of the business, if we say, it is very important to assume these responsibilities towards consumer protection, so as to get the benefits in the same manner as they take it from the society. Now as it is using the society's resources, it is also a moral justification to cater back to the society in the same manner. Similarly, the concept of CSR, which is highly prevalent these days, also compels the business entity to assume consumer protection as the main agenda, and moral justification, as we talked about, because any business cannot thrive in isolation, and it has to take resources from the society and give them back in a more better manner. Similarly, if the business is ignorant about the consumer protections, then the business activities are intervened by the government, who take appropriate measures, and then it will be more drastic for the business to carry on their regular activities. And therefore, in order to avoid the government interference, all business organizations are advised to take some proactive measures for consumer protection. So this Act, Consumer Protection Act 2019, has given a clear-cut definition of who is a consumer. This is also a point of importance. It can be asked in a 1 marker. A consumer is only the person who uses or consumes the goods or avails the services. You see students, anyone who uses the goods or who avails any kind of services becomes a consumer under this Consumer Protection Act, and this service and goods have to be availed for a consideration. A price consideration must be attached to this. Either it can be fully paid or it can be promised to pay. Then it either can be partly paid or partly promised to be paid, or can be through under deferred payment system. So whatever be the payment system, but the price consideration has to be attached to the product or the goods or service to give it a value and for exchange, and this is how a person becomes the consumer. One more important line from NCERT says, students, that any person who avails these services for resale purpose or who buys the goods for commercial purpose is not to be treated as a consumer. Under this Consumer Protection Act, such persons will not be kept. It is outside the scope of this act to include such persons. So the person has to be a final consumer or availer of the goods and service under the act. Now let us see some consumer protection rights. This is very, very important question. Definitely a question is going to come from this segment, students. So you need to remember it as an acronym, HARE-SAY. Say here or hearsay. There are 6 rights of a consumer. So let us see them one by one. With the letter H, it is right to be heard. So this right says that consumer must be heard by the business units from whom they have purchased the goods, or maybe to the grievance cells. They must be open to the complaints and grievances of the consumers, and they have the right to file a complaint and to be heard if they are dissatisfied with a product or a service. So this is the importance of consumer grievance cells to be opened in order to help them exercise the right to be heard. Then we have A says right to be assured. The consumer must get assurance from the goods or services he is willing to buy. The consumer has the complete freedom to access the variety of products. It's a duty of the shopkeeper or the business to show him as much options, as much varieties of the products he or she is having, and as to the quality, brand, price, size is concerned, and the customer has a choice from variety of these products that it can go for either of them. So this is under right to be assured. Then is right to be informed with the letter I, students. This means that the consumer has a right to have all the information pertaining to the product which he or she intends to buy. Complete information must be given. Its ingredients, the date of manufacture, price, quantity, quality, directions for use, everything must be very, very clear to the consumer who is willing to buy the product. Then R is standing for right to seek redressal. Here, whenever we talk about the word redressal, students, you must remember that it is related to the consumer forums, the consumer protection codes under the Act of Consumer CPA 2019. So any unscrupulous trade practices or restrictive trade measures must be brought to the notice of the forums, the courts, appropriate courts that we are going to discuss in a few minutes. So if the consumer goes to the appropriate consumer forum, he can be directed for the replacement of the product or removal of the defects from it, or may be paid compensation if in case of any loss or injury to the consumer. So this is all covered under the right to seek redressal. So this is all about here. Now 2 more rights, say S and E. So S represents students' right to safety, right to safety, because any use of hazardous product may be leading to destruction of life and property. So this right to safety allows consumers to refrain them from hazardous goods and services, so which can cause any damage to their life or property. So the business entities must be using fair means of production, and they're like, if somebody is selling the electrical appliance, it must be ISI marked. They should use the predetermined standard set. As we read in the standardization procedure, all the products and services must be standardized properly, and they must be assured of the quality, or inspection check must be conducted in order to float the goods and services into the market. Then last one is the right to seek education, consumer education it talks about. In consumer education, students, we mean that the sufficient measures must be taken by the government as well as some non-governmental agencies to make the consumer aware about their rights and the reliefs available to them under various circumstances. So there can be some work of consumer organizations and associations as well, who can take active part in creating awareness among the consumers, which are widespread and which are the very unorganized segment in the society.